Gilded cage, tarnished dreams. The golden spoon shimmered under the afternoon sun, its brass fixtures glinting like a pirate's hoard. Inside, the air hummed with the quiet clink of silverware against porcelain, the hushed murmur of conversations conducted in tones that reeked of old money, and the almost imperceptible whir of the ventilation system. Sarah Miller navigated the maze of plush velvet booths, her movements precise and efficient, a stark contrast to the opulent chaos surrounding her. Her black uniform felt like a shroud, suffocating her dreams of paint-splattered canvases and gallery openings. "Another bottle of 82 Cheval Blanc for table 6, barked Monsieur Dubois, the head waiter, his accent as thick as the restaurant's profit margin. Sarah bit back a sarcastic remark about the clientele probably not being able to tell the difference between that and a $2 chuck. Instead, she simply nodded and headed for the wine cellar, her sensible shoes clicking against the marble floor. Her next table was a masterclass in entitlement. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, a couple whose faces suggested they'd been pickled in wealth, complained about everything: the temperature of the wine, the placement of the breadbasket, and the audacity of Sarah's existence. "This escargot is simply dreadful, darling," Mrs. Henderson drawled, pushing the plate away with a bejeweled hand. "It tastes common." Sarah plastered on a saccharine smile that felt like sandpaper on her teeth. "I apologize, madam. I'll inform the chef immediately." She knew Chef Antin would simply roll his eyes and blame the snails. He always did. Later, during a brief respite in the cramped staff break room, Sarah collapsed onto a rickety chair. Eliza Rodriguez, her perpetually optimistic coworker, offered her a sympathetic smile. "Rough day?" Eliza asked, her voice laced with concern. Sarah snorted. "Is there any other kind here? I swear if one more person calls me dear, like I'm some kind of antique they found in their attic, I'm going to scream." "They're just different," Eliza said, ever the peacemaker. "Different? Eliza, they live on a different planet. They probably think money grows on trees watered with Dom Perignon." Sarah ran a hand through her tired hair. "I'm drowning in student loan debt, working double shifts to keep the lights on, and they're complaining about snails tasting common. It's infuriating." Eliza's smile faltered. "I know it's hard, Sarah, but we'll get through it. Maybe you could try painting again, just for yourself, to unwind." Sarah sighed. "Unwind? I don't have time to unwind. I have bills to pay. This gilded cage might look pretty from the outside, but it's slowly tarnishing my dreams." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. She knew she was close to the edge, teetering on the precipice of a spectacular, career-ending outburst. The unassuming patron. The bell above the door of the Golden Spoon chimed, a sound Sarah usually associated with impending doom. Another entitled billionaire, another symphony of condescending smiles and extravagant demands. She plastered on her practiced saccharine grin, but it felt like wearing a mask of sugar that was slowly suffocating her. A man entered, surprisingly unassuming. Not the usual tailored suit and diamond-encrusted watch. This man wore a simple, dark gray Henley shirt, faded jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. He scanned the room, his gaze lingering on the crystal chandeliers, the plush velvet booths, and finally on Sarah herself. There was something intense about his eyes, a quiet observation that made her subtly uncomfortable. "Table for one," Eliza Rodriguez called out, her voice bright and welcoming. Sarah envied Eliza's perpetual optimism. How did she manage to find joy in serving the very people who made Sarah's life a slow, simmering hell? "Please," the man replied, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine despite herself. Eliza consulted the seating chart. Right this way, table 7. Sarah will be your server today." She winked at Sarah, a silent message of encouragement or perhaps pity. As Eliza led the man to table 7, the maitre d', Mr. Dubois, intercepted them. "Allow me, Eliza," he said, his voice oily smooth. He steered the man the last few steps, his posture unusually deferential. "Everything to your liking, sir. Do let us know if you require anything at all." Sarah watched, a knot forming in her stomach. Mr. Dubois only groveled like that for the truly important clientele, the ones who dropped tens of thousands of dollars on a single bottle of wine. But this man, he didn't look the part. Mr. Dubois gave Sarah a curt nod, a silent command to attend to the table. She grabbed her order pad, her forced smile feeling tighter than ever. As she approached table 7, the man looked up, his eyes locking with hers. It was a strange look, almost knowing. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. "What can I get for you today?" Served with a side of sarcasm. "Ready to order?" Sarah asked, the words clipped and devoid of warmth. She didn't bother to make eye contact, focusing instead on the minuscule smudge of dried syrup marring the pristine tablecloth. The man Statham she remembered from his reservation simply nodded. "Just the eggs Benedict, please, and black coffee." Eggs Benedict, how original. Sarah scribbled it down with more force than necessary. Did these people even look at the menu, or did they just pick the most expensive, bland thing they could find? "How would you like your eggs?" she asked, her tone implying she already knew the answer. "Runny, of course, always runny." "Poached, please, medium." Medium, he knew what medium poached eggs were. Sarah felt a flicker of surprise, quickly suppressed, probably just trying to sound sophisticated. "Coming right up," she said, the saccharine sweetness dripping from her voice. She pivoted sharply, muttering under her breath, "1 eggs Benedict, extra basic." As she waited at the service station for the order, she caught Statham watching her, his expression unreadable. She straightened her apron, smoothed down her hair, and forced a smile as she returned to his table with the coffee. "Anything else I can get for you?" she asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "Perhaps a financial advisor. I know someone who specializes in entry-level accounts." Statham took a sip of his coffee, unfazed. "Tell me," he said, setting the cup down gently, "this place seems quite popular. Who owns the Golden Spoon?" Sarah scoffed internally. "Couldn't even afford a decent restaurant, probably. Some corporation, I guess. Doesn't really matter to me, I just work here." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Between you and me, they probably don't pay enough attention to what's going on, they just see the profits." Statham raised an eyebrow. "Profits, you say, so they're not particularly involved in the day-to-day operations?" "Nope," Sarah confirmed, popping the P. "Just collect the cash, probably sitting on some yacht somewhere, sipping champagne while we bust our asses." She gestured around the dining room with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Probably never even seen this place." She was rewarded with a slight smile from Statham, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Interesting," he murmured just as her order came up. "Very interesting indeed." Testing the waters. Statham folded his napkin, the crisp linen making a small snapping sound in the hushed dining room. "So Sarah, you've been here how long?" She refilled his water glass, the ice clinking softly. 3 years, since I graduated high school." "And in 3 years you've seen a lot of changes, I imagine." He watched her closely, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided direct eye contact. "Changes? Not really, same old stuff, different day." She sighed, a weariness creeping into her voice. He leaned forward slightly. "The management, they seem to keep things running smoothly." Sarah snorted, a sound that was barely audible but carried a surprising amount of venom. "Smoothly for who? The clientele, maybe. We're practically dancing monkeys for these people. Anything they want, they get, no questions asked." Eliza, passing by with a tray laden with desserts, paused momentarily. She caught Sarah's eye and gave her a barely perceptible shake of the head, a silent plea for caution. Sarah brushed it off, her gaze snapping back to Statham. "And the owner?" Statham pressed, his tone mild. "What's he like?" Sarah rolled her eyes. "Who knows, never see him, probably sitting on a pile of money somewhere, laughing at us schlepping around here for minimum wage plus tips. He's probably clueless about what actually goes on here." "Clueless, huh?" Statham murmured, his expression unreadable. "Completely. He probably thinks we're all just so grateful to be serving his fancy clientele their imported caviar and overpriced champagne. He wouldn't last 5 minutes in the kitchen during a rush." She gestured vaguely towards the back of the restaurant. "Honestly, I bet he couldn't even tell the difference between a hollandaise and a béarnaise." Eliza, now pretending to meticulously arrange the desserts on her tray, cleared her throat. "Sarah, maybe." "Maybe what, Eliza?" Sarah snapped, her frustration boiling over. "Maybe I shouldn't speak my mind. Maybe I should just keep smiling and pretending everything's wonderful while I'm dying inside. No thanks, I'm just being honest. This place sucks, and the guy who owns it is probably a complete well, you get the picture." Statham took a slow sip of water, the crystal glass gleaming under the soft light. He lowered the glass, his gaze fixed on Sarah. "Indeed, I believe I do." The final straw. Statham barely touched the Chilean sea bass, its pearly flesh gleaming under the warm restaurant lights. He beckoned Sarah with a practiced gesture, offering a smile that lacked warmth. "Miss Miller, the fish is delightful truly, but might I trouble you to have the sauce served on the side instead of drizzled? I find it a tad overwhelming." Sarah's smile felt brittle, masking a bubbling irritation. Certainly, sir, anything for our valued patrons. The sweetness was laced with a sharp edge. She whisked the plate away with excessive force, the silver clattering against the fine china. She slammed the plate down in front of Miguel, the line cook, back in the cramped kitchen. Mr. High and Mighty wants his sauce separated, as if we're not swamped enough already. She mimicked Statham's tone, adopting a ludicrously affected accent. Oh, the sauce. It assaults my delicate sensibilities. Miguel, eternally weary from the kitchen's relentless demands, simply sighed. Just tell me what he needs, Sarah, I'll take care of it. Take care of it? It's a smear of lemon butter, Miguel, not a feat of culinary engineering. Honestly, they think we're their personal culinary genies, bound to grant their every absurd wish. She snatched a pristine plate, gesturing emphatically. Fish here, miniature ramekin of sauce there, ta-da, bespoke gastronomy, tailored to his royal taste. The atmosphere in the close quarters thickened, heavy as the simmering bechamel. Ben, a nervous busboy still green behind the ears, observed Sarah's tirade, eyes wide. In his month at the Golden Spoon, he'd learned to give Sarah Miller a wide berth. She presented the altered dish to Statham with a flamboyant flourish. There you are, sir, the sauce meticulously partitioned. I trust it now aligns with your exacting preferences. Her voice, pitched deliberately high, snagged the attention of nearby diners, interrupting their conversations. Statham glanced up, his expression an inscrutable mask. He lifted his fork, sampled the fish, then carefully applied a minuscule amount of sauce to the same fork for a separate tasting. He chewed with slow deliberation. The ensuing silence was a taut string, broken only by the occasional clink of cutlery. Sarah stood ramrod straight, arms crossed, the false smile plastered across her features. She felt Ben's unwavering gaze from across the room, a blend of apprehension and fascination. This was the breaking point, she realized, implosion or detonation. And right now the latter held a certain allure, summoning the storm. Statham delicately arranged the silverware, a minute adjustment, but enough to catch the eye of a passing waiter. He lifted his chin imperceptibly, a near-silent signal that would be missed by anyone not trained to observe the nuances of the Golden Spoon's demanding clientele. The waiter, young, eager to please, nodded almost imperceptibly and vanished towards the back. Sarah, oblivious, wiped down the already spotless table next to Statham's. Her resentment simmered, a low, constant hum beneath the forced politeness she wore like a too-tight dress. Another day, another parade of entitled appetites and condescending glances. She longed for a world where organic kale smoothie and grass-fed bison burger weren't everyday requests, a world where a genuine smile wasn't mistaken for servility. A shadow fell across her cleaning rag. Mr. Davies, his face a mask of forced geniality, stood looming. Sarah, is everything all right here? His voice dripped with a saccharine sweetness that fooled no one, least of all Sarah. Before she could answer, Davies turned his attention to Statham. Sir, I sincerely apologize if there has been any inconvenience. He wrung his hands, a gesture that amplified his weakness. Sarah here is relatively new, still learning the ropes, you see. Sarah bristled. Relatively new? She'd been here for 6 months, longer than half the staff. Davies, of course, knew that perfectly well. Davies turned back to Sarah, his smile vanishing like smoke. Sarah, I expect you to be attentive to our guests' needs, especially our valued guests. He emphasized the last 2 words with a pointed glare, his breath thick with stale coffee and desperation. Ensure, mister, he paused, glancing down at the reservation card Statham had pointedly ignored. Mr. Smith has everything he requires, understood. Sarah bit back a retort about memorizing the menu backwards and being perfectly capable of taking an order without needing to be publicly humiliated. Yes, Mr. Davies, she muttered, her voice flat. Davies, satisfied he'd played the part of a competent manager, puffed out his chest and turned back to Statham. Is there anything at all I can do to make amends, sir? A complimentary appetizer, perhaps a glass of our finest champagne. He practically vibrated with eagerness to please. On the house, of course. The unmasking. The argument's residue hung heavy, a bitter tang like caramelized sugar left too long on the burner. Statham, rumpled and capped, remained steadfast. His quiet tone, however, possessed a gravity that seemed to compress the air within the dining room. Perhaps, he stated, each word a calculated declaration, formalities are in order. His hand rose in a deliberate arc, removing the baseball cap. A wave of surprised gasps washed through the room. The fabricated persona of a common traveler dissolved. Emerging from the shadow cast by the brim were the chiseled features familiar to millions, the strong jaw, the arresting azure eyes. It was him, Jason Statham, unmistakable. The ensuing murmur succumbed to a near-palpable hush. A fork scraped against china, the sound jarring and disruptive in the sudden quiet. Mr. Davies, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief, sputtered on his wine, sounding like a wheezing machine. Even Eliza, typically radiating optimism, remained petrified, her smile replaced by an astonished gape. Statham surveyed the room, his gaze alighting briefly on each flabbergasted face. Then his focus sharpened, settling on Sarah. The blood fled from Sarah's complexion. The magnitude of her misjudgment detonated within her, a tsunami of remorse and shame. Her practiced air of nonchalance shattered, leaving her raw and exposed. She had affronted him, mocked him, essentially slighted the benefactor, however indirectly involved. Her breath caught sharply. The heavy sweetness of the lilies from the centerpiece turned cloying, suffocating. The murmur of voices, typically a minor annoyance, amplified into an overwhelming drone. Statham advanced a step. The marble floor magnified the sound of his hard-soled shoes, each click a staccato beat counting down to her impending reckoning. His eyes, those sharp blue probes, locked onto hers, holding not rage but disappointment. Her stomach clenched. She yearned to apologize, to justify, to turn back time and unsay her careless words, but her tongue felt thick and unresponsive. The carefully constructed defenses crumbled, crushed by the immensity of her blunder. She remained fixed, paralyzed, as Statham bridged the remaining distance. Judgment served cold. The air in the golden spoon thickened, the clinking of silverware suddenly amplified as Statham cleared his throat. Sarah shifted, her earlier bravado curdling into a knot of anxious sweat beneath her starched uniform. Mr. Davies, puffed up with an entitled indignation, glared at Statham as if he were a particularly irritating piece of lint. "Ms. Miller," Statham began, his voice a low rumble that cut through the ambient noise, "your behavior last night was, to put it mildly, unacceptable. You insulted a patron, made assumptions about their character, and allowed your personal biases to cloud your judgment. This is not a diner, Ms. Miller. This is the Golden Spoon, and we pride ourselves on providing an exceptional experience for every guest, regardless of your personal opinion of them." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "The damage you inflicted extends beyond a single unpleasant encounter. You created an atmosphere of discomfort and disrespect, not just for me, but for everyone present. That is a direct violation of the standards we uphold here." Sarah's face burned. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. The weight of Statham's disapproval, amplified by the curious and now judging stares of the other diners, was crushing. Statham then turned his attention to Mr. Davies. "And you, Mr. Davies," he said, his voice hardening. "Your role as manager is to lead by example, to foster a positive and professional environment. Instead, you allowed Ms. Miller's behavior to go unchecked, perpetuating a culture of snobbery and elitism. You prioritize appearances over substance, judging our clientele based on outdated and frankly offensive stereotypes." Mr. Davies sputtered, his face turning a shade of puce that threatened to match the velvet curtains. I assure you." Statham raised a hand, silencing him. "Assurances are insufficient, Mr. Davies. Your leadership has failed this establishment, and more importantly, it has failed our staff and our patrons." The clatter of a dropped fork echoed through the suddenly silent room. "Therefore," Statham announced, his voice resonating with finality, "effective immediately, both Ms. Miller and Mr. Davies are terminated from their positions at the Golden Spoon. Your actions have demonstrated a fundamental lack of understanding of what this restaurant represents. You are both dismissed." He turned, his back straight, and walked towards the exit, leaving behind a stunned silence and the lingering scent of expensive cologne and cold, calculated judgment. A new beginning. Statham scanned the room, the delicate chime of cutlery the only sound brave enough to puncture the oppressive quiet. The scattering of remaining patrons, some genuinely unaware, others consumed by morbid curiosity, feigned disinterest. His gaze drifted over his staff, their faces mirrored worry tinged with fragile hope. He had dismissed most for the night, but the loyal core, those whose hearts beat with Golden Spoon pride, remained. "Friends," he began, his voice a low rumble of resolve. "Tonight was an anomaly, an unwelcome detour. It does not represent the values that define us." He paused, allowing his words to permeate the room. "Respect, integrity, unwavering dedication to our craft. These aren't mere platitudes, they are the bedrock upon which the Golden Spoon stands." He gave each word its due. "We will not yield. We will not let one rotten piece taint the whole pie." He noticed Eliza Rodriguez's chin lift, a spark of her inherent optimism flickering back into her eyes. Encouraging, he needed that now. A sudden commotion erupted near the entrance, seizing everyone's attention. Sarah, ashen-faced and trembling, was being frog-marched out by Mr. Davies, his features contorted with barely contained rage. A sharp retort, the exact words lost to the distance, but the animosity unmistakable, preceded a shove towards the revolving doors. Sarah faltered, grabbing the brass railing for support, then vanished into the darkness. Davies lingered, his eyes locking with Statham's. No apology, no regret, only smoldering resentment. Then he too was gone. The ensuing silence felt like a suffocating blanket, stifling the questions and fears that hung in the air. Statham cut through it. "Tomorrow," he declared, his voice regaining its authoritative edge, "we turn the page. We will re-examine our procedures, hone our training, and reaffirm our dedication to delivering an unparalleled dining experience. Adjustments will be made," he added, a subtle edge sharpening his tone. "Positive adjustments, changes that will fortify us, improve us." He offered a small, reassuring smile. "Now let's clear this up and head home. We have a restaurant to revive." The kitchen, usually a hive of frantic activity, was eerily still. Eliza, ever the practical one, had already begun sanitizing the counters. Maria, the head chef, was meticulously arranging her spices, her movements slow and deliberate. The busboys, usually a boisterous crew, worked in subdued silence. Eliza caught Statham's eye, offering a hesitant smile. "It'll be all right, Mr. Statham," she said, her voice laced with quiet confidence. "We're a solid team. We'll pull through this." Statham returned her smile, a genuine one this time. He knew she was right. The golden spoon had taken a hit, but it wasn't a fatal one. With dedication, trust, and hard work, they could not just rebound, but flourish. He picked up a discarded napkin and started wiping down a table, joining his team. The scraping of plates and the whisper of cleaning cloths filled the space, a hopeful symphony of renewed purpose. The golden spoon would gleam again, he would ensure it.